The last couple of years, my wife and I have changed our vehicle situation from me driving a big truck and her having a tiny little SUV to her getting a more sizable SUV for herself and the kids, and me taking over her old small little SUV. But one of the downsides to this vehicle is that it doesn't have standard modern features like Apple or Android CarPlay built into it. And since I've been using this vehicle more and more in recent times, I've decided that I wanted to upgrade it by having something like Apple CarPlay that I could use inside it. And I'm not going to pretend to understand how to say the name of this brand, but recently on Amazon, I purchased for around 60 bucks a Apple CarPlay 7-inch screen that I was able to mount to my dashboard. And in this video, I'm going to go over whether this relatively cheap upgrade was worth doing or if this is something that you should skip entirely. So let's take a look. So to start, the unit itself came packaged pretty well. I didn't see anything that suggested that this was compromised in shipping, which is great. However, out of the box, you get a couple things. So you get a adapter to plug into your lighter port for the actual unit itself, as well as a bracket mount. So you can pretty much mount this to your windshield or your dashboard, wherever you find most convenient in your vehicle. And you also get an auxiliary cable as well to plug this into an aux port if need be. So you're pretty much given everything you need to get started with this device. Now, I was half worried that this would mount to my dashboard. I was happy that there was a bit of like a sticky base on the suction to this unit, so I was able to actually mount this right to the center of my dashboard and kind of have it directly in line with the existing screen that's inside my cute little Kia Soul here. And it seems to, once I've adjusted the arms on this, it seems to hold pretty well. Now, as far as setting up, I was curious if this would be rechargeable or not, and like I was wondering if basically it would work unplugged. It does not. It needs to be powered at all times when the vehicle is on. But setting that up was pretty simple. I would have personally though preferred if there would have been like a plug on the back side, not on the side where you can kind of see it dangling out. Minor thing, but just something worth mentioning. Now, a couple other things I do want to highlight. So you do have an auxiliary port. So if you want to like run your Apple CarPlay onto this device and then have it running through your auxiliary port, you can do this. However, I found that the actual, and I thought maybe it was just the wire that was packaged in. It's not. I have a couple different auxiliary cables and some of higher quality than the one that was packaged in. But there seems to be a lot of distortion and noise that comes from that port. I assume it's just due to the fact of the way this was manufactured or to keep costs cheap essentially. But as it stands, I decided just to not do that at all. I skipped that part entirely here and didn't do that, and basically just ran this purely off of Bluetooth. So I was able to connect, my phone was able to connect to both the unit itself as well as Bluetooth in my SUV and pretty much work flawlessly. I was half concerned that connecting this might be difficult just because I've never really used a device like this. Like my wife's SUV has wireless CarPlay and it works super simple. Once you have it set up, you pretty much just turn the thing on and it's connected. This, once I got it set up, works identical. So it takes a sec when you start the vehicle up for it to get connected, but once it's connected, it works pretty much seamlessly. Now, I want to highlight the unit itself does have a couple features built into it, so you can actually use an SD card if you need to play music directly from that if that's something you choose to do. But you can also do screen mirroring, which I didn't really test. You can also play with some of the display settings as well. A couple different settings you can change on there, like wallpaper and that sort of thing, brightness even. I preferred the stock brightness that came with this. The screen itself, you can tell it's not, you know, as high grade as some other units are in vehicles, but it does the job, and I thought it was more than acceptable and looked pretty good. Now, as far as the CarPlay performance goes, this is where you might notice kind of some of the deficits of this unit. What I mean by that is, my wife's, for example, when I'm using wireless CarPlay, seems to work relatively close, almost one-to-one in terms of you touching the touchscreen and the interface really responding and working. Whereas this unit, it appears to be a bit more sluggish, and that could also be a limitation of the hardware itself, but it works. And you have to understand, I just want something that I was able to, use GPS on and be able to, listen to music through and manage some of the apps that I use while I'm on the road for long drives. And this accomplishes that. And I haven't had issues with it disconnecting or not connecting, and I've used this for about almost 2 weeks now, pretty excessively. And so I'm quite satisfied with how this overall unit functions. However, if you're going into this expecting a super ultra smooth experience when it comes to the CarPlay aspect of this, you might be left wishing you had something maybe a bit better. Now, I do want to highlight again, this was a pretty cheap purchase. It's currently $69.99 on Amazon. When I went to purchase it, there was like almost $9 or $10 off, so it came out to around $60. So for that price point, I truly believe there's a ton of value here for what I believe to be an older vehicle at this point. It's a 2016 Kia Soul, right? So it doesn't have all the modern features like my wife's SUV has. It works and it's a decent vehicle, but it's lacking some of those comforts that I'm used to with newer vehicles, or like I had in my previous pickup truck. So being able to add this onto this SUV, this aging SUV, and being able to use some of these modern features like having that navigation up front and being able to juggle my YouTube music app are things that, for me, for the $60, I think there is tremendous value here, and it really makes this feel like a more modern commute than what I was doing previously, which was mounting my phone on the dash and trying to fumble with that while I was driving. So in my opinion, it's a decent sized screen. It mounts very well to the dashboard, and again, I've had this on for 2 weeks and I've had no issues. And it functions to the level that I expect it to function. It's not perfect, and you can definitely get better devices in the market, but as it stands, it works, and it works pretty well for especially that $60 or so price point that I spent on it.